night, we learned Tanya right before Passover, and we learned Tanya. It was wonderful. It really is the idea of escaping our own limitations. So when we read in the Haggadah, which is the book that is our guide to the Seder, because the Seder is very ritualized. It's probably one of the most ritualized things in Judaism. And Judaism has a lot of ritualized things, but 15 very precise steps and very precise passages that we read. And as we're reading those passages and we speak about Pharaoh and leaving Egypt, the Egypt I'm leaving, I've got a lot of Egypt I need to leave. I've got a lot of limitations I have to get past. And we could transpose the word Pharaoh for ego, for evil inclination. Got lots of Pharaohs I got to get out of. And sometimes I think it's nice before Passover starts, and I've been toying with various ideas for the past few days, to sort of focus on what Egypt you want to leave this year, right? This is the opportunity. This is the Exodus. We can leave our limitations any day of the year. We can leave them in the spring. We can leave them in the fall. We can leave them in the winter, in the summer. But this month is the most auspicious time. And this coming 8 days, starting tomorrow night, is the highest energy of freedom. So it's really good in advance to think, well, God's given me freedom. What do I want freedom from? Then over the 8 days to really work on that, knowing that God's going to give you a lot of help, because this is the time of liberation. A great way we get helped is by eating matzah. Tomorrow night by the Seder, which in Chicago, you have to eat that matzah after 7:56. Tomorrow night by the Seder, as you're eating the matzah, the most critical part of the Seder is eating the matzah. If you do nothing else, eat a lot of matzah. Try to eat at least a half of a shmura matzah. Just think as you're eating it, you're eating belief in God. We're literally physically eating a physical food item that gifts us with belief in God. And the second Seder, Thursday night, as you eat it, you're eating health. We're literally physically eating health. Maybe if you know someone that needs more belief in God or more health, as you're eating your matzah, you can ask God that this should also help someone else in your life. And for the entire duration of the holiday, every time you eat matzah, you are eating belief in God. Normally, I only eat bread from like Sabbath to Sabbath. But on Passover, I eat matzah every single day. Because if God's giving me the gift of belief just to eat matzah, I'm going to eat matzah. So it's a very special time. And I think this sort of relates to what we're going to be learning now in Tanya. So we're starting here, chapter 38. It's always exciting, a new chapter. So in chapter 38, we're going to be discussing what we discussed for the bulk of the chapter is not what we start off the chapter on. But I'm going to sort of explain to you where we've been and where we're going and what we're going to start with. So we have been in chapter 35, 36, and 37, focusing on the significance of action. Action in terms of bringing God to me, action in terms of bringing God to the world, action in terms of bringing redemption. And all of those chapters on action make us sort of think, well, it's not so important what's going on in my mind, in my heart. What's important is do. But obviously, what's important is everything. So in addition to all of the focus on action, we also need to have in our mind and our heart a feeling and awareness of God. So the bulk of chapter 38 focuses on, even though we've been talking for 3 chapters about action, let me tell you, if you serve God without feeling and serve God without intellectual and emotional investment, it's far less than if you incorporate your mind and your heart, which of course is what we focus on in Tanya. The beginning of chapter 38 is still sort of expressing what we've been talking about for the prior 3 chapters. So we're going to bring a law, which really shows how the bottom line is the action. And then we're going to say, and we're going to discuss the importance of intent for a number of chapters. Just so we should know we're supposed to be doing everything. So chapter 38 begins, V'hine, im kol hanal yuvan hetev psak ha'halacha arucha b'talmud u'paiskin. Everything we've said above for the past 3 chapters makes it very, very clear to me, the law as it's laid out in the Talmud and in the commentaries and how that Talmud comes down as law. Dehirher lav kedibur dami. That thought is not enough. Thought is not considered like speech, meaning we're talking here about prayer. If someone prayed the Shema prayer, which is a very significant prayer, it's biblical. So it's a very significant prayer. It's one of the two most significant pieces of all of our prayers is the Shema prayer. If you're going to pray almost nothing else, at least once a day, say that verse, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, or in English, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our Lord, the Lord is one. That is a very, very significant prayer. So if a person is praying the Shema prayer in his heart, in his mind, he's so focused on God. He's focused on all of the intentions that prayer has, and that prayer has hours and hours of intention. He's accepting God's service. He's accepting the commandments. He's focusing on the unity of God. He's doing everything but one thing. He's not moving his lips. He's not actually saying the words. It doesn't count. If you would take a prayer book and you would read with your eyes the prayers with a lot of focus and concentration on God, you didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I was so focused. I was so spiritually inspired. That's beautiful. But you didn't do anything because you have to move your lips. Thought, intention, feeling still doesn't count as the physical moving of the lips, which is a form of action. Now you're praying the Shema prayer with so much intention, but you're not moving your lips. You didn't do the Shema. You didn't do that biblical commandment. You have to go back to likros and to say physically the words. You can say, oh my gosh, I've never prayed the Shema prayers beautifully my entire life. I was in a rapture. I was in a divine ecstasy. I was in intense spiritual clinging to God. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. But you didn't do the commandment because you didn't move your lips. And moving lips is the action of prayer. And so too, when we say the grace after a meal of bread or matzah, and any other food that accompanies it, we have a biblical commandment to bless God. That's biblical. And again, if a person is sitting in devout concentration and feeling so grateful to God for the food in front of him and for the food he ate, and he's so cognizant that this food is from God and God is every second vivifying it, and God in his grace and compassion and love is giving him food, that is very beautiful. But he didn't do the commandment because he didn't read the words with his movement of his lips. Even if he reads it with his eyes, it doesn't count. Now for us, very often, of course in English, we don't read with our lips. It would take us a long time to read if we read with our lips. We read with our eyes. And some people that are fluent in Hebrew, obviously when they're reading Hebrew, if they're reading a passage, an article, they read with their eyes, not with their lips. But when we pray and when we study Torah, both of those situations, in prayer and in study of Torah, God's will and wisdom, we have to move our lips. We want to bring it to the dimension of action. And for some people, that's really difficult. I don't know if because it's so much faster to pray with your eyeballs. I don't know if it's because it's awkward. Not only do we want to pray and move our lips and learn Torah and move our lips, we also want to hear our voice. We are supposed to pray loud enough that we hear our voice. And ideally, when we learn, we are also supposed to learn out loud that we hear our voice, which some people find very difficult. But it's actually a component of the commandment of prayer and the commandment of Torah study. And not only for things biblical, like the Shema prayer is biblical, like the grace after eating a meal of bread, matzah, or anything else, bread and something else, or matzah and something else, is biblical, but all other blessings that are rabbinic. Every time we use our words, or are supposed to be using our words, to praise God, to acknowledge God, to thank God, we have to literally move our lips. And also, of course, for any action of prayer. Now, let me turn it the other way. Let's say, so we just created a situation where I have tremendous mental and emotional focus and I'm not moving my lips. Did it count? No. Now let me flip it the other way. Let's say I'm moving my lips. And my heart is spaced out. My mind is spaced out. My heart is spaced out. This might sound odd, but it's not so unusual. You're praying and you're in Never Never Land. You could be learning at a Never Never Land, but you're moving your lips. We hear the sound of your voice. Did it count? Well, for your learning, probably not, because if you're not intellectually engaged, it's not really learning. But for your prayer, yes, most of prayer, like 99% of prayer, if you move your lips and your mind and your heart are not involved, it's not a great prayer, but we still call it a prayer. Oh, it now got very dark in the ritual checking for the chametz. So people that have never seen this, you might see in the background that light. That's the light of a candle, because we check for the chametz ritually the night before Passover. Passover begins tomorrow night, though as we said already, tomorrow morning from 10:30, we do not eat or own or see in our possession any leavened products like bread or noodles or cake or perfume or alcohol, mashka, vodka. The night before, meaning like right now, we ritually check our house. And then afterwards we say a proclamation nullifying any leaven we might have missed. Tomorrow morning, in Chicago time before 11:30, we are going to burn what we find tonight and then say an even more significant declaration nullifying any leaven from our possession at all. And we check it by the light of a candle, which of course is reflective of the soul, because the soul of man is like God's candle, God's flame. So we are checking with the light of the candle and all the dark crevices to find the leaven, which we put out 10 pieces beforehand, wrapped up very well. We do not want any breadcrumbs in our house now. But we put out the 10 pieces, so we definitely are going to find something. And then we might find many other things as well, of course. It says about the founder of Chabad, whose work, the Tanya, we are currently studying, that he spent once an entire night searching for the leaven, for the chametz, in a room, a small room. How could it take so many hours in a small room? Because obviously he was searching inside himself. And all the work we do in eradicating the leaven from our home is all supposed to be mirrored by the work going on inside ourselves. Say, well, we're not maybe so holy to be so conscious and focused, but even the very fact of doing the physical work already helps us on our inner journey. It's told that when the school, the Lubavitch Yeshiva, the school for study, was started, they were very selective in the students that they allowed in. Again, students don't mean young boys. Students are probably the age of young men. And there was a young man that applied shortly before the Passover holiday. And the principal, who was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who at that time was not Rebbe, because his father, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, was Rebbe. His father was the dean, and he was the principal, so to speak. And he wasn't sure if he should take this man or not, because he saw he was very, very smart. But he could see by his face, by his features, he was also coarse. And that wasn't exactly what they were looking for. He wasn't sure, do I take him? Do I not take him? Is he appropriate for this school of study of deep Hasidic thought when spiritually he does not seem to be holding there? And his father, the Rebbe, said, take him. This was about a week before Passover. And he said, for the next week, give him the hardest jobs to do, because the students were all the cleaners for Passover in the school, which is great. We should always make sure the men work very hard. So the students were all working. Give this man the hardest jobs to do, the most physically strenuous jobs to do, cleaning for Passover. And at the same time, every day, push him to learn very deep tracks, very deep texts, and every day test him. So for a week, he's going to be arduously working physically for the holiday, and going to be arduously working intellectually to learn these very deep works of Hasidic thought. And that's what happened. And a week later, it was the Seder. And the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe writes, when he gives over this incident, that when he looked at this man's face by the Seder, what will be for us tomorrow night, it was a completely different face. It was a refined face. 1 week of physically hard work preparing for the holiday, and spiritually intently learning, and his face was completely different. So that's some of the thoughts as we check. But of course, I'm not checking now because we're learning. So going back to what we were discussing. So the Rebbe here is creating a very interesting question. We'll focus on prayer. Within prayer, as we can see from our discussion, there are two components of prayer. There's the component of the action of saying the words, moving your lips and hearing your voice. And there's the component of the spiritual focus, the mind and the heart's involvement. Both of those components are part of the commandment of prayer. In other words, the commandment has two aspects, the action and the intention. The action of the movement of the lips, the hearing of the voice, and the intention of the mind and the heart. And we're saying that for almost all prayer, if you do one and not the other, does it count? Well, if you had the intention beautifully in place, your mind and your heart are completely focused, and your lips were shut and no words were moved, were uttered from those lips, it didn't count. You didn't pray. You did beautiful contemplation of God, but you didn't do the commandment. You didn't pray. Well, what if I did it the other way? What if I did not focus my mind and heart, 50% of the commandment, but I moved my lips, you heard my voice, but my mind and heart were completely spaced out? Did I pray? Yes, you did. Besides for two pieces of prayer, the first line of the Shema prayer and the first blessing of the Amidah Shmona Esrei prayer. Besides for those two places in our prayers, for every other part of prayer, if there was the action, the movement of the lips, the hearing of the voice, and there was no intention of your mind or heart, you didn't do a great job. You only did 50% of what you were supposed to do, but we still give you a check on your chart. You still fulfill the commandment. So the question obviously is why? If doing 50% counts, then if 50% of the commandment is my mental and emotional focus, why shouldn't that count the same way if I do the other 50% and I'm moving my lips and hearing my voice, but I'm not doing the other parts? It counts. Like either you need to do everything for it to count, or one of the two options need to be done. But here we're saying, no, this is a very weighted on one side examination. If you do the movement of the lips and the voice without any intention, besides those two pieces I mentioned, the first line of Shema and the first blessing of the Shmona Esrei Amidah, it counts. Not great, but it counts. But if you just have intention and no movement, it does not count. Why? Well, the why goes back to what we've been discussing for these past 3 chapters. In the end of the day, our service is to change our body, our animal soul, the world. So the movement of the lips, the hearing of the voice, is the physical action of prayer. If the physical action of prayer is in place, you did what you were supposed to do to transform the world, the microcosmic world of self, your body, your animal soul, the macrocosmic world around you. You did it. You made an impact on the world because you did an action. An action, the movements of the lips as an action, affects the world. So of course we want your mind and heart involved. That's 50% of the commandment. I mean, my gosh, prayer is talking to God and spaced out. That doesn't sound like a very functional prayer. It's not. It's really not. But it still counts as prayer because you impacted the world. And that's what we are here to do. As you probably remember our discussion of last week, when we spoke about the significance of Torah versus the significance of charity. And we said charity and the other action commandments affect the world. Torah is the best fuel for my soul and my connection to God. So what takes precedence over what? And we said, well, you need Torah for yourself. But with all the Torah study inside yourself, you should have the fuel and the passion and the inspiration to go out and change the world by doing lots and lots of commandments and helping other people do lots and lots of commandments in service of God. So when I'm praying with my lips and my voice, while I'm thinking about, I don't know, it's my shopping or to-do list. No, that's not how God wants me to pray. but at least I moved my lips. At least my voice was heard. At least I impacted my body and my animal soul and the world around me. All right, you did something. We're going to give it a check. But if I pray with lots of mental and emotional focus, but I didn't move my lips, there was no voice being heard, I didn't change the world. Well, then you didn't do the commandment, because the purpose of the commandment is to change the world. So does anyone have any tips for us on how they pray and what helps them stay focused when they pray? Because of course we want to do both. We want to move our lips, we want to hear our voice, and we would like our mind and heart involved. So anyone have any tips what helps them pray with get to pray, make sure they move their lips, make sure their voice is heard, and ideally bring their mind and heart in? Anyone have something to share on that?
Hi, it's Lisa.
Yes, Lisa. What's your tips?
So I don't remember which class it was, but somebody had mentioned previously that when they pray and they move their lips, their concentration is much more intense. And then my sister-in-law, Fruma, told me that if I'm praying at night and reading and moving my lips, I don't have to speak loudly. If I'm already in bed and my husband's sleeping, I can, just as long as I could hear it, that will be good enough. Because I was worried, because I was only reading before.
And your husband's a light sleeper?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's helped. You've been doing it ever since?
Ever since. It's been months. Yes.
Wow. That is beautiful. That is beautiful. So special. That is so special. So I agree with, I don't know if I said the tip or someone else, but I definitely know for myself, looking inside really helps. The Lubavitcher Rebbe actually says that looking at the words, those are holy letters. Looking at the words really helps facilitate the concentration and focus. For myself, because I'm, human, and we all are so ADD distractible nowadays. Maybe it's all the technology in our world. So I really try to keep my finger on the place, or at least my finger on the line. I'm not claiming I always do it, but it's definitely one of my goals is to keep my finger on the line, because I definitely find it focuses me. Oh, there went my picture. I mean, you can only see black anyway. So I definitely try to keep my eyes on the words. I definitely try to keep my finger on the word. It definitely helps me. Definitely, the commandment is for your voice to be audible. When you're doing the Shmoneh Esrei Amidah, the voice should be a whisper that only you hear. The rest of the time, it should be audible. But if you don't want to wake up your husband, of course, there might be exceptions to that. I know for myself personally, when I'm praying loudly, it helps my focus and concentration. Like the more we have a light, but I still only see darkness on my picture. Maybe it'll take a minute or two for it to focus. I don't know. Light is on in my room and I still only see darkness on my screen. Oh, I'm back. I mean, I was here the whole time, but now you can see me. It's anyway a very blurry picture. It doesn't help that much. Very poor lighting in the room. So when I am praying loudly, it tremendously helps my concentration. Don't wake up other people in the process. But if you have the luxury of being able to pray loudly, I know for myself, it's the best tool I know to help me really focus on prayer. And definitely looking inside and definitely keeping my finger on the line if I can. Something else that the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, besides he highly advocates looking at the letters, looking at the holy letters of the prayer book, he also says, if it's too much to concentrate on the whole prayer, try to concentrate on a piece. Like every day, concentrate on another piece. Like in theory, let's say take the prayers that you say and split them into 5 pieces, 7 pieces, and every day focus on one of those pieces. And okay, so every day you only prayed 1/7 with real focus. But if God can piece together all the parts that you pray all week long, by the end of the week, you gave him a very good prayer. Because sometimes we don't have the inner focus to be able to really, because concentration is difficult for us. So sometimes it's hard for us to concentrate that long. And sometimes we don't have the time, because inevitably, if we're really concentrating, it takes us longer than if we're not. If you don't concentrate, you're like, wow, how did I eat my prayers so quickly? And if you're concentrating, it's not as quick. So therefore, if it's too much time to say all your prayers and concentrate, or if it's too draining and difficult for you to concentrate for that length of time, every day pick a next prayer to concentrate on, and God will weave the pieces together. So that helps me sometimes. Saying it loud helps me. Looking inside helps me. Keeping my finger on the place helps me. We're also told that it helps to say a psalm before we start praying. The psalm is like a prayer to help our prayers be done appropriately. Anyone else have any other thoughts that work for them? Any other tips to get themselves to pray and move their lips, to get themselves to pray and hear their voice, to get themselves to pray and have their mind and heart involved?
Hi, it's Dottie. Hi.
Hi, Dottie.
Hi. Are you with your family in Springfield?
We are.
Wow, how wonderful.
It is
Enjoy
beautiful.
every minute.
Thank you.
Great to get away. So what I do is when I'm davening, I think about that I'm davening for my siblings because we were not brought up super religious. And I sometimes I think I'm doing for them also, and for my son and my grandchild and my, that other part of the family. I feel like I'm the representative. And then I have my grandma's picture close by, and she was very sneeze and a real Yiddish shamana. She spoke Yiddish and was very deeply committed. And I just think about her. I keep her picture near me, and the Rebbe's picture, and the Frierdiker Rebbe, and then I feel like I'm in a company of all these angels. So I'm speaking for my family that don't know how to pray. So that helps. And the other thing is when I'm really getting into it and I get distracted, I think, oh, the Yetzer Hara is doing its job. I'm really getting close to being in a good place, and it's doing its job. So I know it's happening. I'm just going to pull away. So those things help a lot.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that idea that as you pray, you're conscious that you're praying for other people who might not be praying, because I think that could help all of us, that we all probably have people in our heart that maybe aren't saying the prayers. And if we're conscious that our prayers are for them as well, that gives our prayers more weight. It gives them more significance to us, gives us more sense of like, wow, the power of my prayer, I got to do it right because it's not just me. I sort of do something like that for one of my children. I can't say it helps every day, but there are definitely days where I'm definitely praying better because I'm feeling like my prayers are for this child as well. So that is a very powerful tool, and definitely surrounding yourself with the holy people in your life on all levels helps. I definitely agree with that. I think that also works very, 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 very well. And yes, what you're saying, actually, it says in the Tanya, if we get distracted, we can tell ourselves exactly like Dottie is saying, all right, this is a sign I'm doing well. Since I'm doing well, my evil inclination is feeling a little endangered and trying to stop me because I'm doing a good job. So instead of getting discouraged, like, what? I'm trying and my evil inclination is still bothering me. I'm such a failure. No, I'm actually a success story. That's why my inclinations bother. So I'm going to be even more successful because I'm going to be the winner here. Those 3 tips are great, very practical, and they all really work. So we said, if he moves his lips, but his heart is not focused, not his heart and not even his mind. Yatsa Yedei Chavaso Bidi Evid. Bidi Evid means worst case scenario. Not a really stellar performance, but all right, we'll give you a pass. So giving you a pass, we'll say you prayed. And you don't have to go back and say, oops, I guess I didn't pray because I was in Never Never Land. So I guess it didn't count. No, we'll say it counted. No, you don't have to go back. It counted. It wasn't a great job, but it counted. Levad miposach rishon shel Kriyas Shema, except as we said for 2 places in our prayers, the first line of the Shema prayer, which is so significant that we really do want your heart and mind involved. And if your heart and mind was not involved, you do have to go back. And the first blessing of the Shemona Esrei. When you are praying, just to keep this in mind, the 2 most critical prayers are the Shema prayer and the Shemona Esrei prayer. The Shemona Esrei prayer is the Amidah. It's when we stand with our feet together facing east, or in Israel facing Jerusalem, or in Jerusalem facing the place of the temple. And that prayer is the height of the prayers when we ask our requests from God. The other prayer that we're saying is incredibly significant is the Shema prayer. Now, the Shema prayer is not about our requests from God. The Shema prayer is the height of the prayers of fusion with God, of spiritual experience of God, of love and awe of God, of commitment to God. So from a spiritual perspective, the Shema prayer is the most climactic moment of my fusion of mind, heart, and body to God. And the Amidah, Shemona Esrei prayer, is the highest point of my requesting my needs from God. And prayer is supposed to have both of those goals. Prayer is a time of fusion, and prayer is a time of requesting. And that's why those two prayers are the most significant prayers. And as such, for the beginning of each one, the first line of the Shema and the first blessing of the Amidah Shemona Esrei, we do need to have emotional or at least mental involvement. And if we didn't pray. But for every other part of our prayers, like we said, you're only doing 50% of the commandment, but we're still going to say you prayed because the movement of the lips is an action, and action means you're impacting the physical world. We're in this world to impact the physical world. So, okay, you did something. We'll give it a pass. And this concept that only the first line of Shema and the first blessing of the Shemona Esrei of Amidah, do you have to have your involvement on a spiritual, emotional, at least mental level, is what it says in the Talmud. Okay, this was a part that the commandment is intention. From now on, reading also counts. Why? Why does reading only count when prayer is about talking to God? Prayer is about fusion with God. V'hainu, meaning to say, because the intent, the spirituality of the commandment, the focus of the mind, the focus of the heart, all that's helping the soul. But guess what? Your soul doesn't really need help. Your soul is a piece of God. No matter what you do to mess up your body, no matter what you've eaten, no matter what you've spoken, no matter what you've experienced, your soul is a pure piece from the very essence of God. The essence of the soul is the essence of the God, irrelevant of any experiences you as a physical person have undergone, and therefore your soul has gone through as well. So the soul doesn't need rectification. So the intention, the investment of the heart, the investment of the mind, the investment of the soul is all helping soul. But your soul's in a perfect place. She doesn't need rectification. The purpose of the commandments is to draw down God's light, to rectify the body, to rectify the animal soul. When we physically are engaging our very physical body, and there are 5 parts of our body that are engaged in speech: the tongue, the lips, the larynx, the palate, and the teeth. So when those 5 body parts are engaged in producing speech, my body is involved in the commandment. My body is being rectified by the commandment. That's what I'm here to do, as we've been discussing for the past 3 chapters. I'm here to give God my body. I'm here to give God my animal soul. So if I have all this spirituality going on, it's great for my soul, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to change my body. I'm here to change my animal. And for that, I need the investment of the body in its most physical component. Like these physical body parts, the tongue, the lips, the teeth, the palate, the larynx. That's what I need invested in prayer, so that the prayer can rectify them. And this is, of course, not only limited to prayer. The Rebbe here is just giving a very extreme example. Why was prayer a very extreme example? Because we understand prayer is about serving God with your heart. That is a whole commandment of prayer, serving God with your heart. It's not an extra. In other words, every commandment, we want to give God our thought, our speech, and our deed. Every commandment. Every commandment, we want to give God intention. We want to give God mental and emotional focus. We want to love God. We want to fear God. We want to have our mind involved and be thinking, this is for the sake of God. This is to rectify the world. This is to bring the redemption. This is for God's sake. This is for the sake of my fusion with God. Every time we serve God, we want our minds involved and we want our heart involved, full of love and awe of God. But if we don't do that, we understand we still did the commandment. If you gave charity without thinking, this is for God's sake, this is for my fusion with God, and I feel so much love and awe of God in my heart when I give charity, we understand you still gave charity. But when I pray, prayer is all about talking to God. So how can I be talking to God, not thinking about him at all? Like I was literally spaced out and making my laundry list, making my shopping list, thinking about everything I have to do when I'm finished prayer, when I finish my prayers. How could that count? Well, it does. You did do a great job, but besides that first line of Shema, first blessing of Shemona Esrei and be done, it counts. So that's the most extreme example how the bottom line of our commandments is to change the world. And if I have world involved, in this case, my tongue, lips, larynx, teeth, and palate, I'm doing the commandment. Not the best, but I'm doing the commandment. And that's why I don't go back. It counts like I did the commandment. But I have all this spirituality involved. Well, that spirituality is great. And all that spirituality my soul really appreciates. But that's not why I'm doing the commandments. I'm not doing the commandments for my soul to appreciate them. I'm doing the commandments to change the world. I'm doing the commandments to change my body. I'm doing the commandments to change my animal soul. And for that, my body needs to be involved. Now, what we are up to, so this is a great stopping place. You can pretend I planned it, but I didn't, is to say, but our sages say that when you do the command without feeling, it's like a body without a soul. Yikes, that's a pretty strong statement. What this means, commandments without emotion are like a body without a soul. So we just finished what we discussed for 3 chapters plus the beginning of this 4th chapter. Bottom line is action. And now we're going to say, but intention, emotional involvement, mental involvement are critical for our commandments to be valuable. So we got to do it all. And with this, we can go into our Passover holiday. And of course, we know this is the most auspicious time for redemption because we were redeemed in this month. We're in the Jewish month of Nisan, the first month from the months of the year. This was the month of redemption. Our sages said we were redeemed in Nisan. We will be redeemed in Nisan. It was today the 13th, which was a holy day on the Hasidic calendar, the passing of the 3rd Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. Now already it's night, it's the 14th, which is the birth of the Rambam. But definitely a very holy day, very, 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 very intense day. As we said already, from 10:30 tomorrow, nothing leaven, and from before 11:30, we burn the chametz that we gathered, and we make that declaration that we absolve and nullify any chametz in our possession. If we don't want it to be in our possession, but if it's there unwittingly, we absolve it anyway. We claim no ownership on it at all. And during Passover, again, we're walking to freedom, walking to being released of our own personal pharaohs, our own personal Egypts. It's wonderful beforehand to have it in mind. And a lot of people think sort of like, oh, Passover is about the 2 Seders. Maybe they don't think it's about 1 Seder. Or maybe they know it's about 2 Seders. That's the highlight. And the rest of the week, we sort of don't eat bread and eat matzah. But actually, it's a culminating experience because everything in Judaism only goes up. We never go down. So every day of Passover increases the intensity of the spirituality of the Passover experience. And that's why the first 2 days of the holiday are focused on the liberation we experienced 3,335 years ago. And the final 2 days are focused on the ultimate redemption with Mashiach that we're experiencing now. And therefore, the final day of the holiday is actually the most auspicious day in the whole year for the coming of the redemption. It's called the Day of Mashiach. And therefore, the Haftorah, the part of the portion that we read in synagogue, is one of the most beautiful prophecies of Isaiah about redemption, the famous prophecy of the wolf and the lamb. And that's the Haftarah portion of that final day because it's all about Mashiach. And we conclude the holiday with literally a physical meal, again, ingesting this reality of redemption. So just like we start Passover with a Seder, with matzah and 4 cups of wine, and benediction and praise and celebration for what we experienced, we conclude the holiday with matzah and 4 cups of wine, that you could take grape juice if you would prefer, and benediction and praise and celebration for the redemption that is happening now. And that's a beautiful way to end the holiday, because otherwise it's like, what? All that week, 8 days, it's over, going back to mundane life, how disappointing. But this way we say no. We're taking the power of redemption, taking the power of the holiday, and we're pulling it into the regular year, where we should experience complete redemption. Before